A suburban home, warm and inviting. The camera slowly moves through the house, capturing framed wedding photos, laughter frozen in time, and a life built on trust, until now. Protagonist, James Carter, mid-30s, corporate manager, loving husband. They say you never see the betrayal coming, and maybe that's true. I certainly didn't. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my life was perfect. A beautiful wife, a good career, a house we made into a home. I thought I had everything. I had no idea how quickly it could all come crashing down. Flashback, a year earlier. James and Emily Carter sit in their backyard, drinking wine under the soft glow of patio lights. James, smiling, raising his glass. To us. To 8 years of love, loyalty, and building a life together. Emily Carter, late 20s, charming but distant, forces a smile. To us. She takes a sip but avoids his gaze. Something is off, but James doesn't notice. Present day, James is in his car, parked outside his office building. His hands grip the steering wheel as his phone buzzes. Text message from Brian Walker, James' best friend. Brian, hey man, we need to talk. It's important. James exhales, confused but dismisses it, thinking it's about their upcoming weekend plans. Cut to later that evening. James arrives home, finding Emily already in bed, scrolling through her phone. She quickly locks the screen when she sees him. James, kicking off his shoes, climbing into bed. Long day. Emily, forcing a yawn. Exhausting. I had a headache all afternoon. James kisses her forehead. She tenses slightly, a reaction he doesn't catch. Morning. James prepares breakfast in the kitchen. Emily is dressed quickly, unusually eager to leave. James, teasingly, what's the rush? You barely touched your coffee. Emily, grabbing her purse. Meeting a friend for brunch. I'll see you tonight. She leaves without looking back. James watches her go, a small feeling of unease settling in his chest. Later that day, James' phone buzzes again. Another message from Brian. Brian, James, you need to call me. Now. James meets Brian at a quiet bar. Brian looks nervous, gripping his beer like it's the only thing grounding him. James, laughing nervously, sipping his drink. Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on? Brian, hesitating, then sighing deeply. James, I don't know how to say this, but I saw Emily with someone else. The world seems to slow. James blinks, then lets out a short, disbelieving laugh. James, what? No, that's impossible. Brian, serious, voice low. I was at the Redwood Cafe this morning. She wasn't with a friend. She was with some guy. Holding hands. Laughing. Kissing. Silence. James stares at Brian, a sinking feeling in his stomach. James, whispering, you're wrong. Brian, softly, I wish I was. James lies awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Emily is asleep beside him, breathing evenly. He finally gives in, heart pounding, and picks up her phone from the nightstand. He hesitates, but then unlocks it using her birthday. Her messages load. His breath catches in his throat as he sees them. A series of messages from an unsaved number. Unknown number. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Emily. Me too. Can't wait to see you again. Same time tomorrow. James' hands shake. His whole body goes cold. Morning. Emily walks into the kitchen, humming to herself, stopping when she sees James sitting at the table, her phone in his hands. James, quietly, deadly calm. Who is he? Emily, freezing, then forcing a laugh. What are you talking about? James tosses the phone onto the table, open to the messages. Emily's face drains of color. Emily, stammering. James, it's not what you think. James, voice breaking, standing up abruptly. Not what I think. Emily, I read everything. How long? How long have you been lying to me? Emily stares at him, eyes filled with guilt but not regret. That's what hurts most. Emily, whispering, 6 months. James staggers back, as if physically struck. The air leaves his lungs. James, in shock, voice cracking. 6 months? Emily's silence is confirmation enough. James leaves. He doesn't know where he's going, only that he needs to get away. He drives aimlessly, hands gripping the wheel until his knuckles turn white. Everything he built, everything he trusted, it's all gone. A montage of scenes follows. James alone in a motel room, staring at the ceiling. James at a bar, drowning his pain in whiskey. James in his empty office, unable to focus. James, voice hollow. I lost my wife that night. But the truth is, I lost so much more. I lost my home, my stability, my belief in love. I lost myself. As the music swells, James sits in his dark apartment, staring at the divorce papers in front of him. He grips the pen, breathing heavily. Setting, James' empty apartment. Half-packed boxes litter the floor. Divorce papers sit on the coffee table, untouched. James stands by the window, staring out at the city below. His phone vibrates, another missed call from Emily. He ignores it. James, voice numb. You don't realize how much of yourself you lose in a marriage until it's gone. Every habit, every decision, it was all built around her. Now, I didn't even know what to do with myself. A knock at the door. James hesitates, then opens it. Brian stands there, looking concerned. Brian. Jesus, man. You look like hell. James, flatly. I feel worse. Brian steps inside, looking at the half-packed boxes. Brian. So, it's official? You're moving out? James nods, voice hollow. Yeah. She keeps the house. It was in her name before we got married. I'm taking whatever fits in these boxes. Brian exhales, running a hand through his hair. Brian. This isn't fair, man. She should be the one losing everything. Not you. James, bitter chuckle. Yeah, well, life's not fair, is it? Beat. Silence stretches between them. Then, Brian. Look, I know it feels like your world is ending, but you can't let this destroy you. You have to fight back. James, scoffing. Fight back? How? She's already won. Brian, firmly. Not if you don't let her. A montage. James trying to distract himself, working late at the office, drinking alone at a bar, aimlessly scrolling through social media. Nothing helps. Late one night, he stumbles home drunk, knocking over a box. Papers spill onto the floor. Old love letters from Emily. He stares at them, his expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, rage. James grabs the letters, ripping them apart. He throws them into the trash, breathing heavily. Then, he sinks to the floor, burying his face in his hands. The weight of everything finally hits him. He has lost everything. His wife, his home, his sense of self. James, broken whisper. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. Setting, James' office. His boss, Mr. Reynolds, a stern-looking man in his 50s, sits across from him, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Reynolds. James, we need to talk. James sits up, trying to focus through his hangover. James, what's going on? Mr. Reynolds sighs, folding his hands. Mr. Reynolds, you've been one of our best employees for years. But lately, you've been missing deadlines. Showing up late. Your performance has declined significantly. James swallows hard, knowing where this is going. James, quietly. I'll do better. Mr. Reynolds, gently but firmly. I wish I could give you more time, James. But the company is restructuring. And we have to let you go. Silence. James stares at him, the words not fully sinking in. Then, reality crashes down on him. First his wife. Now his job. James, voice hollow. In the span of a month, I lost everything I had spent years building. My wife. My home. My career. I was nothing. James wanders through the city at night, hands shoved in his pockets. He stops outside a bar, considering going in. Instead, he keeps walking. He ends up at a bridge, staring down at the water below. James, whispering. For the first time in my life, I wondered, what if I just let go? A long pause. The wind howls around him. Then, his phone vibrates. A message from Brian. Brian, I don't care how bad things are. You're not alone. Call me. James exhales sharply, shoving his phone back into his pocket. He turns away from the bridge. Keeps walking. Keeps breathing. A few days later, James sits at a coffee shop, sipping black coffee. Across from him sits Michael Hartman, a former colleague who started his own business. Michael, I heard about what happened, man. I'm sorry. James, shrugging, sipping his coffee. Shit happens. Michael, leaning in, serious tone. Look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. You lost everything. But that means you have nothing left to lose. So why not start over? James, raising an eyebrow. Start over? How? Michael, grinning. By working for yourself. James stares at him, skeptical. Michael leans back, taking a sip of his coffee. Michael, you always hated the corporate grind. You're smart, James. You have experience. Instead of working for someone else, why not build something of your own? A pause. James considers this. James, thoughtful. For the first time in weeks, a thought crossed my mind. What if this wasn't the end? What if it was a new beginning? Montage. James researching late into the night, taking notes. James sitting with Michael, discussing business ideas. James sending out emails, making connections. Days turn into weeks. James starts freelancing in business consulting, using the skills he once applied to his corporate job. Slowly, his confidence returns. One evening, he looks in the mirror. He doesn't recognize the broken man from before. He sees someone new, someone stronger. James, determined. I spent so much time mourning what I lost. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was focusing on what I could build. Months later, James walks into a coffee shop. Emily is already there, waiting for him. She looks different, less put together than before. A hint of regret in her eyes. Emily, softly. Hey. James, nodding, sitting across from her. Hey. Silence. Then, Emily, hesitant. I heard you started your own business. That's amazing, James. James, shrugging. Yeah, it is. Emily hesitates, then reaches across the table. Emily, whispering, regretful. I'm sorry, James. For everything. James studies her, then nods. But there's no bitterness in his eyes. No pain. James, smiling slightly. I know. But I'm not looking back anymore. He stands, leaving Emily behind, walking toward his new life. Setting, James' small but functional home office. A laptop sits open, an email glowing on the screen. James leans forward, rereading the message from a potential high-profile client. His hands tremble slightly. After months of grinding, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt, it was finally happening. A major company was interested in working with me. This wasn't just a job. It was the opportunity that could take my business to the next level. He quickly dials Michael, excitement buzzing in his voice. James. Michael, you won't believe this. I just got an inquiry from a Fortune 500 company. Michael, laughing, impressed. Damn, James. That's huge. What do they want? James, reading the email aloud. They need a consultant to help them optimize their internal operations. And they're asking for a proposal. Michael whistles. Michael, if you land this, you'll be set, man. You ready for this? James takes a deep breath, a determined look crossing his face. James. Yeah, I am. A few days later, James walks into a high-end downtown cafe to meet a potential partner. As he waits in line for coffee, he hears a familiar voice behind him. Nathan, mocking smirk. Well, look who it is. James stiffens before slowly turning. Nathan, the man who ruined his marriage, stands there, looking smug. James, calmly. Nathan, grinning. Didn't expect to see you here. Heard you lost everything. Tough break, huh? James clenches his jaw but keeps his expression neutral. James, coolly. Not everything. Just the things that weren't worth keeping. Nathan chuckles, sipping his overpriced coffee. Nathan, mocking. That's so? Emily and I are doing great. By the way, just in case you were wondering, James smirks, shaking his head. James, I wasn't. Nathan's smile falters slightly, as if he expected James to be broken. But James just steps forward, pays for his coffee, and walks away without another word. James, internally satisfied. For the first time, I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to prove anything to Nathan or Emily. My success was the only closure I needed. A few weeks later, James stands in a modern corporate boardroom, his laptop connected to a large screen. Executives from the Fortune 500 company sit around the table, watching him. He takes a deep breath, then begins his presentation. As he speaks, his confidence grows. His words flow effortlessly. He owns the room. James, reflecting, I had spent so much time feeling like a failure. But in this moment, I realized I was more than my past. I was more than the man who was cheated on. I was more than the man who lost everything. I was building something of my own. After the presentation, the CEO, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, nods approvingly. CEO, impressive work, Mr. Carter. We'll be in touch. James shakes her hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, pride. Later that evening, James sits in his apartment, staring at his phone. Then, an email notification appears. He opens it, eyes widening. Email from CEO. James, we were extremely impressed with your proposal. We'd like to officially offer you a contract. Let's discuss terms. James exhales, running a hand through his hair. Then, he laughs. A deep, relieved, victorious laugh. James, overwhelmed but happy. I did it. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. A week later, James receives an unexpected text from Emily. Emily, can we talk? Curious, James agrees. They meet at a quiet park, the same one where they used to go when they were happy. Emily looks different, tired, uncertain. She fidgets with her hands before speaking. Emily, softly, James, I made a mistake. James, raising an eyebrow. Which one? Emily exhales, looking down. Emily, leaving you. I thought I wanted something else, but Nathan isn't who I thought he was. I miss you. James studies her for a long moment. Then, he smiles, but it's not the smile she remembers. It's a new smile, a stronger one. James, calmly, I appreciate the apology, but I've moved on. Emily, you should too. Emily's face falls. For the first time, she is the one who has lost something. James stands up, nods politely, and walks away. James, final realization? I thought revenge would make me feel better. But the truth is, success was the best revenge of all. Setting, James' new office space, a modest but sleek workspace in a shared business hub. Sunlight filters through the large windows as James types on his laptop. Michael walks in, tossing a folder onto James' desk. Michael grinning. All right, boss. That big contract you landed? It's already bringing in more clients. We're expanding faster than expected. James, smirking, shaking his head. Feels surreal. A year ago, I was sitting in an empty apartment, drowning in self-pity. Michael sits across from him, leaning back in his chair. Michael, and now look at you. Your own business. A growing client list. And you're not even miserable anymore. James chuckles, but there's a hint of thoughtfulness in his expression. James, softly. Yeah, I think, for the first time in a long time, I'm happy. Later that night, James and Brian sit at a rooftop bar, drinks in hand, looking out over the city. Brian, I gotta say, man, I've seen people go through breakups, but you transformed. James, shrugging, taking a sip of his drink. I had no choice. I could let it destroy me, or I could build something better. Brian, raising his glass. Well, here's to the rebuild. They clink glasses, but James hesitates before drinking, a pensive look crossing his face. Brian, noticing. All right, what's on your mind? James exhales, looking at the skyline. James, it's funny. I used to think if I ever saw Emily again, I'd either want to scream at her or beg her to come back. Brian, and now? James, small smile. Now, I just feel nothing. Brian nods, understanding. Brian, that's how you know you've moved on. A parallel scene. Emily sits alone in her apartment, the same apartment she once shared with James. Her phone rests in her hand, open to a text conversation. Nathan's messages are cold, distant. Nathan, I think we need space. Emily. Nathan, please, let's talk about this. Nathan, not now. Emily's fingers hover over the keyboard, but she doesn't type anything. She knows. She looks around the apartment. It feels empty. James isn't there. Nathan is pulling away. And for the first time, she realizes she's the one who lost everything. Emily, voice hollow. I thought I had made the right choice. But now, I wasn't so sure. A week later, James is walking through a bookstore, casually browsing, when he hears a familiar voice. He turns and sees Emily, standing at the end of the aisle. Emily, softly, surprised. James. James offers a polite nod, but doesn't seem affected by seeing her. James. Emily. An awkward pause. Then, Emily, hesitant, searching his face. How have you been? James, smiling, relaxed. Good. Really good. Emily studies him, and there's something in her eyes, regret, longing. Emily, quietly. I'm happy for you. James nods, then glances at his watch. James, it was good seeing you, Emily. Take care. He turns and walks away, leaving her standing there. She watches him go, realizing she is nothing more than a chapter in his past. A montage. James in his office, signing a new client contract. James running in the park, healthier than ever. James standing on his apartment balcony, looking out at the city, not with sadness, but with hope. James, voice steady, content. I thought losing everything was the end of my story, but I was wrong. It was just the beginning. Setting. A modern cafe with large windows overlooking the city. James sits at a corner table, typing on his laptop, a cup of coffee beside him. His business is thriving. His confidence is stronger. He's no longer the man defined by betrayal. He's something more. A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing Emily, losing everything we built together, meant I had nothing left. But what I didn't realize was, sometimes, losing everything gives you the chance to start fresh. James closes his laptop, stretching. As he does, he notices someone standing near the counter. A woman, about his age, reading a book. She looks up, catching his eye. There's a moment of quiet recognition, not of the past, but of potential. She smiles. James smiles back. James, hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. That evening, James meets Michael for drinks at their usual rooftop bar. They clink glasses, celebrating another successful business deal. Michael grinning. Man, I still can't believe how far you've come. James, smirking, sipping his drink. Believe it. Michael, curious. So, any new love interests? James chuckles, shaking his head. James, not yet. But I think I'm finally open to the idea. Michael, raising an eyebrow, teasing. Whoa, look at you. Emotionally available and everything. James laughing, nodding. Crazy, right? They both laugh, the moment lighthearted yet meaningful. James is no longer defined by the past. He's truly free. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sits alone in her dimly lit apartment. She scrolls through old pictures of her and James, her fingers pausing over a particularly happy one from years ago. She sighs, setting the phone down. Nathan is gone. Her life didn't turn out the way she thought it would. And for the first time, she realizes she was the one who truly lost. Emily, quietly to herself. I thought I was making the right choice. But now, I know better. She closes her eyes, exhaling. But this time, there is no undoing what's been done. Cut back to James, standing on his apartment balcony, looking out over the city. His phone buzzes, a message from a potential new client. Another opportunity. Another step forward. He smiles, tucking his phone away. I used to think love was about holding on, but now, I know it's about knowing when to let go. And sometimes, letting go is the best thing you can do. He steps back inside, closing the door behind him. The past is behind him. The future is his to build.